Welcome to the All American Podcast. I'm your host, Mady Anderly. I cannot believe I'm saying this, but the podcast is back, guys. If you are an OG follower, you know I had a podcast back in 2021, which is wild because so much of my life has changed since then that it's not even this isn't even a rebrand of the old podcast. It is a completely new podcast, and I just feel like I have so much to unleash to the world. It feels like a dream come true that I get to finally sit here and chat with you guys because just so much has gone on. So I don't really know where to begin, but I guess I can give you guys a rundown of what to expect within my podcast before I kind of get into today's topics. And that is, All American is for the women out there who have kind of felt a little bit suppressed, not gonna lie. If you're like me, you're kind of disappointed with how much liberal leaning media there actually is. And especially in podcasts, I feel like it's hard for me to find a podcast that is both political and Christian. And obviously my whole podcast will not be politics. I am not a politician by any means. And I definitely don't know all of the nooks and crannies of politics. So if you're here for just politics, I am not the podcast for you. But I haven't found many speakers and influencers who are Christians and conservatives, and they combine that into their podcast openly. I feel like there are so many Christians out there, and when I say Christians, I mean pastors and influencers and speakers who are very influential, but they don't want to get into hot topics, quote unquote. And I think that's so funny because we live in a world where we have to be talking about these things because otherwise nothing will change. And I see a lot of people that complain about what's going on in the world, but they're not doing anything about it. They just want to sit and complain. And so that's why I started this podcast. I really think there needs to be more women who speak up. And just a side note, if you're an influencer or you have in any capacity a platform, or maybe even just within your friend circles, maybe you don't have an actual platform on social media, but we need to start being the voices of women, conservative women, who believe in the Bible and God's truth and not being afraid. What really hyped me up to start the podcast officially, again, I've been thinking about this podcast for, I want to say 6 months. Nick knows, I would talk about it all the time. I'd be like, I really want to start the podcast. I'm really feeling led. And I just the whole vision wasn't there yet. So fast forward to the election, praise God, Trump won. I will get into that as well. After he won, I was like, wow, I feel empowered, and I feel like this is the time to say what I want to say, because so much of it is, I guess, controversial. It's really not controversial, but our world makes it controversial. But a lot of it is hot topics like abortion and being a woman who wants to stay home and be a mom and a wife, things that are maybe anti-feminist that we'll also get into. And I feel like I'm going to make some feminists mad on the show, but really I am not anti-women. I'm a woman, of course. I think women have the same rights as men do to go and make a career and pursue their goals and dreams. That is not the point of the podcast, to belittle women. I'm actually here to empower women. So all that to say, I feel like it might make some people mad, but I want to talk about the things that are controversial, again, quote unquote, controversial, and make this a safe space for people that believe the same, because there is not a lot of platforms and podcasts and YouTubers and speakers who really want to get into this stuff, which is really sad. And I would just encourage you guys within your communities and your circles, don't be afraid to talk about these things. If you're a Christian, so much of the issues in today's world are hitting home for Christians, because it is your biblical values that are being under a microscope and are being challenged. And that a lot of people are trying to make fun of nowadays. And there's just so much I'm going to get into in this podcast. I feel like it ranges from everything. Relationships, being a wife and newlywed life, and long distance, homemaking. I would love to even get into like interior design and like how to make your home a cozy and welcoming space. How to be a wife and like be okay with submitting to your husband. And that's kind of goes into the feminist side of things, which I know a lot of women may not like. But if you are like me and you want to be a good wife and you want to support your husband, we're going to talk about that. And what it means to be a Proverbs 31 woman, and how we can, be a great wife and mom. Obviously, I'm not a mom yet, but once I am a mom, I'd love to talk about that, and have some moms on as well soon. But talk about how we can be a great wife and mom, but also build a career. This is not anti-women career. I've built a photography business from the ground up and also do social media. And so I love business. I love building a business. It's so fun. It's creative. It's challenging, but so rewarding. And I'm in full support of that. So saying all that, I don't want this podcast to seem like you're a woman. That automatically means that you are going to run a homestead and bake sourdough, and that's all that you can live up to. I'm here to say you can do whatever you want. America is a free country. Whatever you want to do is yours for the taking. So going into that backstory. So basically on election day, I'll kind of talk about it a little bit because I saw a few of you guys were like, I want to hear like your thoughts on the election. And oh my gosh, that whole day I sat on the couch watching the news. Y'all might think like, girl, get a life. Like, it's okay. You don't have to watch the news all day. But it is the most critical time in our country. And again, I'm not a politician, but I felt this weight, just like so many other women and even men too. Like, we were all feeling this weight of what is going to happen with our country next? Because if it goes one way, it's going to be really, really bad. And if it goes another way, it's going to be really, really good for us. So the morning of the election day, I had some worship time to myself. Nick had gone to work, and I was just like, I've got to like pray my heart out. And Nick and I have been praying for President Trump, and really overall just that God's will would be done, and that there would be hope for America, and that this new revolution would just completely like landslide our country. Like, everyone would be on board, and that we can get America back to an amazing place that it was born to be. So Nick goes to work, and I just felt led to basically like get on my knees and pray. And I pray to God throughout the day, and I would like to say like I have a good prayer life. I'm not perfect at it, but the times that I get on my knees in prayer is, like it's just going down. Like, it means business for me. Like, if I am on my knees worshiping and praying, I am like, God, like, I surrender everything. And so I remember it was the morning of the election. Before I turned on the news, I was like, I don't want to like start the day with fear and anxiety and freaking out about what the results are going to be. I knew it was going to be a long day, and I was just like, I've got to start this out the right way. So I play some worship music, and I love the song Heal Our Land by Mav City. I think it's by Mav City. I feel like I need to confirm that. But yeah, I was listening to Heal Our Land, and I played it over and over and over again. And I was on my knees crying. I started just bawling my eyes out, because I like to say that I am a true patriot at heart. And if you're listening, you probably are too. Like, if you cry at the movie The Patriot, we're bound to be best friends, because I get so like, I get goosebumps whenever I talk about America. I think it is the greatest nation in the history of the world. I think it's something to be so proud of. And even if you're listening to this and you're not an American, I feel like other countries look to America, and especially right now, like, everyone's watching America. But I think people respect it, and where we came from to now, America is the greatest country on earth. And I was crying because America has so much potential. We've already done so much, but America has so much potential to be a city on a hill, aka like a light throughout our whole world. And we have just fallen so short of that. And obviously there are so many amazing Americans out there. I would like to think and pray that most that voted for Trump, which was the popular majority of the country. If you look at the map, we're all red pretty much. And I would like to think most of those people are hardworking, good people that love America, right? But there are some where they are just completely manipulating the truth of God's word, and they are falling so far away. The enemy is taking this world and this country so far away. And obviously, like us as Christians, we're not perfect either. We are all broken. But America is going in so far of a trajectory that I'm so lost. I'm so confused. I look at where America's going and I'm like, we've got to reel it in, baby girl. Like our country was founded on amazing biblical, keyword biblical principles that we are like not doing any of that anymore. We do not care about the Bible. We make fun of Jesus. I mean, looking back at Kamala Harris's rally where she looked at the Christians that were shouting Jesus is King, Jesus is Lord, she said, you're at the wrong rally. Like outright disputing and rejecting and making fun of Christians and Jesus. That sums up where America is at today. The world has gotten so ignorant towards Jesus. So I'm sitting on my knees crying and I'm like, I just want America to feel like it did growing up. Like when I think about how I grew up in America to now, it feels like two different countries. And that's really sad. Like I growing up was so proud. My dad, he was a Marine. My grandpa was a Marine. I have plenty of uncles that served in the military. Like the patriotism for America runs deep in my family. And growing up, like I grew up with that respect and admiration for America. And it's just heartbreaking to see how far it has fallen from its original values. And so obviously, like I had some worship time. I felt so much better. Prayer does so much for not only you, but you know, everything around you who you're praying for. It really impacts people. It took a burden off of my shoulders that day. I was like, you know what, Lord, whatever you have planned for America, let your will be done. Because in the back of my mind, I'm like, if Kamala wins, I think that's a really good sign of the end times. Like we're probably done for at that point, you know? And obviously I don't know God's plan, but I was like, if Kamala wins, it's probably part of the end times anyway. So that's great too. Like Jesus comes soon. And I was just kind of joking to Nick about it. I was like, well, at least we know we'd probably be spiraling towards the end times. But no, I was so thankful that Trump won. I watched the election night like a hawk because in 2020, I went to bed at like 11 or so. Like I was like, just wake me up. Like I'm sure Trump will win. And then all those random votes came in, like the 20 million votes for Biden overnight. And I don't know, this year I was just like, I want to stay up and really like watch this and know what's going on. So when it was around, I think it was around 2 a.m. Eastern time here where he won Pennsylvania. And I was just like, oh my gosh. I was like grabbing Nick by like the shoulders. I was like, no way. He just won Pennsylvania. Like that's such a good sign. He's like probably going to win. And this is what gives me chills because if you think about it, I was thinking if Trump ends up winning, like something bad's going to happen anyway. Like they're going to try to steal it. They're going to try to cheat or they're going to like drop this bomb on like, I don't even know, like something bad was bound to happen. And I just kept seeing like Trump won Pennsylvania. Trump was just winning in all of these states and he ended up being, I think it was like Alaska or something like that, like to get him over the 270 vote. And he ended up being the next president-elect. And I was just sitting there like in shock. I think I was preparing for the worst. But when he won, I literally started crying. And I know a lot of liberal people who might be watching this would be like, that is so stupid and cringy that you would cry that Trump won. those that get it. Because if you know what's really going on, what the truth is, our country needed this. And I really think we were on the verge of like life or death for America. And so when he won, I was just so thankful. All that to say, once he won, I woke up the next day with this new feeling in my bones. I woke up, which I think a lot of us felt the same. I've talked to you guys in the DMs about this, where you woke up and you felt so much lighter. And it's actually funny. I made a TikTok side note where I was like, the Kamala pastor accent audio on TikTok, where it's like, joy cometh in the morning. I woke up and I like made a TikTok of me waking up in bed and I was like, joy cometh in the morning, because we won. And I genuinely felt so joyful. I was like, God, your mercies are new every morning. Praise Jesus. Hallelujah. So I woke up the next day so happy. And I've been thinking about doing this podcast for a while. And I've kind of had this general idea of talking about the classic American woman and how to bring that back and how it's okay to be a feminine woman and what that really means. What does being a classic American woman mean? And I really wanted to talk about what all that entails. And when he won, I was just like, I feel unstoppable. I feel like this is the time to bring this up, to talk about this. I feel like America is entering a new wave, a new way of life, a healthier way of life. I can't wait for RFK to be involved. And if he can make our food system similar to Europe, I can't imagine where we're going to be in 5 to 10 years. Like, this impacts like Nick and I's future kids. If you're a parent out there, this impacts your kids. Like, we were thinking futuristically, like, this election will impact our future children and the kind of world they grew up in. And so I'm just so excited. And I just felt like this is the time. This is the time to do it. This is the time to talk about it. I have never felt so liberated, so validated that so many people think the same as me. When we think we're like the minority out there, we are clearly not. If you look at the popular vote, if you look at how red America was after the election, there is more of us than you think. I just think people don't want to talk about it. And I have no shame in talking about it. I have lost over like 1,000 followers on Instagram, which is where I do a lot of my posting about like my political beliefs. And I got so many positive messages. Like, it completely outweighed any mean messages, comments, concerns. That I just felt like, I don't care if people disagree. Like, I can have an opinion too. Why do Trump supporters, or really just Republicans and conservatives, why do we feel like we have to be silent about it? And so I've already lost, I think I've kind of weeded through like the followers that don't agree with me, and that is totally okay. You are an American too. You have the right to your opinion. But I think now, like, I've kind of filtered through most of the hateful messages and people that disagree with me. And I'm like, I have nothing to lose at this point. The people that are here that are following me, great. And if you're listening to this, I'm sure you think the same as me, hopefully. And if not, I hope you come in with an open mind, and we're going to talk about a lot of topics that you may not agree with, but I hope I can change your mind and see things from more of a biblical perspective. And if you don't like it, that's okay. You don't have to listen. But that is kind of a synopsis of why I started this passion project, where I want to take it. We're going to talk about all kinds of things. I also would love to get into health and wellness. As you guys know, and some of you maybe follow me for, health and wellness is a huge part of my life. And I think it's also a mandate that God has given us to take care of our bodies. Our bodies are a temple. And I really want to talk about that. I want to talk about PCOS. I want to talk about iron deficiency. I want to talk about wellness habits and habit stacking and how we can be the best versions of ourselves. Anyways, I just want to talk about everything under the sun with you guys. And like I've said, on Instagram and TikTok, those are great platforms, but they are very short pieces of content. Like, I have so much I want to talk about that I'm like, I can't wrap that all up into a 10-minute TikTok, you know? So I'm trying to think what else I want to talk about before I get into my message today. I think one thing I really want to talk about is rewriting what people think of Americans. Like I said, I think the world is watching America right now, and I think people think, like, from other countries, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of other countries think Americans are absolutely batshit crazy. Like, I really think they think we're crazy. And I hope in my podcast, and obviously this is directed more towards women, but if men are watching too, that's great. I really want to rewrite what people think of Americans, because I think they all think we're lazy, fat, and like just balls to the wall, like have these crazy beliefs, and that we shave our heads when we don't like things go our way, like, you know, what I'm talking about after Trump won. I want to rewrite the American like stereotype. So it's actually funny because I asked chatgbt, okay, let me pull this up for you guys. I asked chatgbt, what is a classic American woman? Okay. Again, this is women oriented, but think kind of the same for men. It's just different. Okay. ChatGPT says, a classic American woman is often understood as someone who embodies certain cultural values or ideals associated with American society. Blah, blah, blah. Number one, a classic American woman is independent and self-reliant. Historically, the American ideal of a woman often reflects a sense of independence and strength shaped by the country's pioneering and self-sufficient ethos. Hello? I promise I went to school. This could be seen in the early American frontier women who had to be resilient and resourceful. It goes on to say family-oriented, modern and progressive, which I think is actually going to be really cool to talk about, that women are modern and progressive. Like, just because we're talking about old-fashioned values, that doesn't mean we're going to be like living mentally in the 1900s. Like, we are where we are in 2024 today. How can we bring old-fashioned American founding principles into our modern world? Number 4, patriotism and community. The classic American woman may also be portrayed as someone with a strong sense of national pride, deeply connected to American history and values like freedom, equality, and hard work. Number 5, style and personal expression. I actually would really love to break this down as well in another episode, because there is a classic American style that I really want to talk about. And I think obviously our world is so trashy and immodest at times, and I really want to bring back like classic American fashion. But it says, from a cultural perspective, the classic American woman can also be defined by her style, which often blends casual and sophisticated. Think of timeless looks like the all-American jeans and a t-shirt, or a preppy aesthetic popularized by figures such as Jackie Kennedy. Like, that is my bread and butter. I really want to talk about that as well. Number 6, versatility and adaptability. The American woman has always been very fluid, embracing change and diversity. So again, this is ChatGPT, okay? Like, this is not Webster's dictionary or anything like that, but this can be subjective. Not everyone is the same in America. Like, I want to point that out. Not everyone in America is this type A American, like, I don't know, like, people have different styles and ways of doing life. So like, I'm not trying to stereotype and like generalize that everyone that's a Christian conservative is this way. Like I said, you live in America. I completely support freedom in every aspect of life. Like, you have the freedom to dress how you want, to live how you want, believe in what you want. That is your God-given right, okay? But if we want to become more, what's the word? I guess like just traditional in a sense of like, where did America start? Obviously, we're not going to be wearing like the dresses they wore in the 1770s or something like that. Like, we're not going to be dressing like that. We're obviously, like I said, in a modern day 2024 But like, what is the underlying principles? Modesty. Also, this is going to be a very biblically founded or perspective podcast. So if you're not a Christian, like this may not apply to you and you may not like it. But I'm thinking like in the sense of, okay, modesty was really huge in the 1700s. And it's actually like our mandate as Christians as women to dress modestly. So like, think of that in terms of, okay, obviously we're not wearing those dresses like in the 1700s, but they really valued modesty back then. And we've gotten far away from modesty in our country. And I've fallen short of that so many times where I'll like be out and about and I will like be wearing probably like some skimpy workout clothing. Like this is, I've gotten better about it, especially since being married, but like it's easy nowadays to just walk around and be like, oh, this is normal. Like I can just wear this out and about. Like no one really cares. And while no one really cares, especially if you're in a relationship, like, see, feminists will probably be really mad at me for this, but like if you're in a relationship, you owe respect to your partner. And part of that respect comes from how you dress in public. And if your boobs are out, if you have half your butt hanging out, that's not respectful to your spouse. And it's causing other men to stumble. And if there's other men that see you who are also married, that's affecting his eyes, his lust for someone else seeing your boobs out. And he has a wife at home who's maybe being like the mother to his children. And that would hurt that woman very much. So it's just stuff like that where I'm like, okay, how can we be better as American women and get back to the basics? Like from a biblical perspective, like modesty, or how do we talk to our spouse, or how can we build the American dream that we all have? And I believe like it has been reinstated since the election. We have this fresh American dream. We can do anything we want. Like obviously we could beforehand, but I really think now we've turned a page to we're moving forward onto a new path as Americans where I think we're going to have so much freedom and the economy is going to do well and we can start that business, or like we can take that trip, or we can, I just think we have the freedom, and especially coming up, we have even more freedom to do the things we really want to do. And so with that being said, I had a couple more points for you guys. ChatGPT, I have to say, by the way, like Nick got me on it and it's been a lifesaver, like for like paraphrasing things or like rewriting things. If you're not a strong writer, it's a nice little cheat sheet. If you're, in college, probably shouldn't encourage that, but if you're in college and need something rewritten, ChatGPT. Okay, the last thing that I want to touch on in this episode, and I think it's a great starter topic for my podcast, and we will dive into this more as time goes on, but I got some questions from you guys, and it was actually funny because one girl put this in the question box for stuff she wants covered in my podcast, and all she said was how to be a woman. And I actually laughed at that because I was like, honestly, same, I get you. Because like I said, in our modern day, being a feminine woman, a classic, traditional, old-fashioned woman has become so skewed that I feel like people don't even know what it means to be like a woman and be feminine and traditional. And so it just made me laugh, and I was like, I totally get it. So what I really want to talk about is how to be a woman in our modern day society, who very much promotes feminism. And like I've said, this is not anti-women at all. But how can we be feminine? How can we tap into, and I know like some people talk about this, like you're masculine, you're feminine, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I don't really know too much about that, but how can we tap into being more feminine women? And what makes a woman? What are those qualities that make a woman? And I do want to also in another episode dive into Proverbs 31, because that truly like lays out what a woman after God's own heart is all about. How she looks out for her husband, how she works hard, how she prays, how she lives her life. She's beautiful from the inside. It's not really as much about the outside, which I could get into as well, because America is so materialistic and it's have this, and then you can be beautiful or you can be successful. And I really want to get back to the basics on what the Bible says to be a woman. So we'll dive into like a separate episode on Proverbs 31. That's going to be probably more like, I don't know, a sermon kind of vibe. But for today, I want to say, first of all, it is okay if you want to be an old-fashioned feminine woman. Why has that gotten so, like, why have we gotten so far away from that as a society? Like, why is it, if people look at you and you're like, you want to just be a mom? You want to be a stay-at-home mom, that's it? You don't want to have any dreams or goals? You don't want to have a career? That is my goal. That is my dream, to be a mom, to be a stay-at-home wife, to be a stay-at-home mom. Like, what's wrong with that? And I'll tell you right now, like I've told Nick throughout our whole relationship, all I want to be, like, I love photography. I love social media. I love this podcast. Like, I would probably do this podcast once I have kids, but I'm not a mom yet, so I don't know. But all I want to be in life is a really good mom, because the family system in our country has gotten so jacked up, and people can't help that. Like, and I respect the single moms out there that are hustling, trying to like make a living for you and your babies. Like, again, I respect that. It's more of a, I want it to be like known that it's okay to be a stay-at-home mom. It's okay if you want to be a homemaker. Me and a friend, one time we were joking, like, we're baking sourdough and we're like, we're in our homestead era. Like, I'm trying to have a homestead, okay? Like, take me back to the 1800s. And that's like a whole other thing. But it's okay to want that. Like, I feel like social media and just our society in general is so like, women need to work and build, and don't let anyone get in your way, and be a hard ass, and have like very strict boundaries, and like you don't let anyone in, and you don't ever get to show emotion, and you need to prove yourself to the world. And the more materials you have, the more success you have, the more money you have. That's what it's all about. I'm here to tell you, if that's great if you want that, but you can be a soft, womanly, feminine person, and that's okay. If you want to be like a gentle, soft person, especially like if you're married or a mom, like, I think you should want to be a nurturing figure. And I've actually personally, like, I'll just kind of go through my personal experience really quick. So I went to Dallas Baptist University when I lived in Dallas, of course. Grew up in Dallas and went to college there and everything. Well, I didn't drop out. I got an associate's degree, but I quit school 2 years early, and I was like, I'm going to make my own photography business. Like, I've been doing photography for 2 years at that point, but it was like obviously like very little business. Like, I didn't even have like a LLC or anything. But I told my parents, like, hey, there's no point in you spending all this money on my tuition, because they were helping me with my tuition. I'm so thankful for that. But I was like, I just want to take some of that money and like invest into a business. And they were like, that's great. Like, go for it. And they're probably like, thank God, like crying in the corner. Like, we don't have to pay for college for Mady. Oh, you're welcome, Mom and Dad. But yeah, so I was 19. No. I was 20. Left school early and got an apartment with a friend of mine, and literally just started working my butt off. I would do like shoots with influencers and people from The Bachelor, and like at the time, like that was such a big deal. It's so funny, but looking back, I'm like, it's really not that big of a deal. But I was just like shooting all the time, trying to connect with people, build my business, get the word of mouth going. And I got to a point, so that I was 20 years old then, and then up until when I got married this year, so I was 25, that's 5 years of building a business in Dallas, that I lived in Dallas. I did live in Nashville for 6 months during that 5 years, so I don't really count that. That was a crazy time, and it's actually a part of my testimony, so I'll definitely get into that in a different episode. But within these 4.5 years that I was in Dallas, I built my business to a 6-figure business as someone with just an associate's degree, but wanted to work her ASS off and make a name for herself. And I like to think like I was, how do you say this without like bragging? But like I felt like I was one of the top photographers in Dallas, and I had consistent clientele. Like I'm talking, I had 4 to 6 shoots a week. But it cost me a lot. Like I was so busy running around for these shoots, but I was very money driven at that point in my life. And like, obviously like I was a single girl, like I need to provide for myself, and like really wanted to be successful. And in my eyes, like success was money and like materials and what I had and where I lived. And I lived in a beautiful high-rise apartment when I met Nick, and I remember walking in and I felt like I made it. Like I did it. I looked over like through my living room window in my apartment, and I could see the Dallas skyline, and I was just like, oh, I've made it in life. And like, I really thought I was hot shiz. You know what I mean? So from that point on, God really worked on my heart, because I had a lot of pride in what I could do for myself and my accomplishments, and I made it all on my own, and I'm so successful, and you know, I'm making this much money, and I'm like an entrepreneur, and like I was just taking so much pride in that at the time. And honestly, when I met Nick, it's really true that your partner is a mirror reflection of you and will like show you the parts of you that need work. And over time, like I was just like, okay, I don't need money and like how busy I am to show how successful I am. Like success actually comes from slowing down and enjoying the little things. And now that I live here in Charlotte, like after we got married, I moved here, and I was like, wow, like there's actually more to life. And like God really humbled me a lot in the past few months. Even like my friends and like Nick's friends even that have known me since Nick and I started dating, they've all said, you just walk with a different sense of peace now, and you just look and seem different. And granted, I've entered my natural era. I took out my hair extensions. I got rid of my lip filler, just stuff like that, where I've like become more comfortable in my own skin. Like I'm just not feeling this need to like prove to everyone, or I don't care what people think anymore. My cortisol has lowered drastically since I moved out of Dallas. Dallas is just very hustle, 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 work, work, work. Like, what do you do for a living? Like, that's how you earn respect, is like, oh, I do this, or I started this business, or I drive this car and live here on the street, and you know, all that kind of silly stuff. But living in Charlotte, people do not care about that here. People are so laid back. People just love like a Saturday going on the lake, or going to a brewery, or trying really good food, or just hanging out and watching football at someone's house. And obviously I think a lot of that's just the South, and Texas is the South. It's just a different kind of South than the Carolinas, I would say. But all that to say, God has worked on my heart so much the past 6 months even, where I've really just found that success is in slowing down. Success is being gentle and nurturing and enjoying the little things in life. As silly as it sounds, it's like that's what you're going to remember with your life. Obviously, your accomplishments are beautiful, and I do not want to like undermine how cool it is to be an entrepreneur or to accomplish your goals in life. Like that is something to be proud of. It's just finding this balance of like, that's not my identity. Like that's not what makes me me. So finding that balance was like really hard at first. Like it was very humbling. God humbled me real quick. He was like, listen, you don't need all that. You don't need all that to be happy. You don't need like, I've never really been one for like designer things. I've had a couple like designer makeup sent to me and all this stuff. But like, I'm not really big on like names and brands and like what kind of car you drive, all this stuff. But he was just like, no, why don't you just enjoy like going on a walk with your husband? Like that's successful. That's finding success in life. Why don't you take a friend out to coffee who's having a really hard time? That is being successful. So I think just like leaning into this slower pace of life, or even just a slower mentality. Like maybe you are really busy, and there's nothing wrong with being busy. There are definitely busy seasons in life. It's just like finding moments in between where you're like grounding yourself and you're at peace with yourself, reminding yourself who you are in the Lord. That to me is what makes life successful and beautiful, and what we're going to look back on in 30, 40, 50 years. And I don't know, I just want that to be a challenge that like you can balance everything. Women are superheroes. I look around, even on like Instagram, like friend of a friend that I know, and I'm just like, wow, like they are killing it. Obviously, social media is a highlight reel, but I look at, for example, like Megan Griffin is the founder of Skin Farm. If you follow me, you've probably seen me post about Skin Farm. They have personally changed my skin for life, like a night and day difference. But Megan, I've never met Megan in person. We've talked through Instagram, but she shares a lot of how she tries to balance motherhood and being a wife with being a founder and running this very large, growing, successful business. And she's very transparent that like it's really hard sometimes, but also so rewarding. And finding that balance is not easy, but you will be so glad that you work towards finding that balance. And I think I even have a friend that just had a baby in January, and she's a stay-at-home mom, and she crushes it. Like her and her baby are best friends. And I think that's how it should be. You should be like very intentionally parenting. And again, I'm not a mom, so don't come for me, all the moms out there. But from my observations and people I know, babies that have their mom around, or even when like if they work, like that's okay. But when their moms are home, they are so intentional and want to help develop their children spiritually, physically, everything. It's so inspiring, and it really just gives me faith in like women are amazing. Like we are so nurturing, yet so strong, yet so graceful, yet so disciplined and hardworking. And we should really give ourselves a pat on the back because we do a lot. And there's a lot of skills that we have that men don't have, but there's also skills that men have that women don't have. Like men are amazing too. And that's where I think feminism, I don't really agree with feminism because men are also great. Men have their own skills and talents and God-given natural capabilities that they bring to the table that we need, so that women can also be feminine and do things that we were naturally gifted to do. And that's why I think my podcast is so unique, because no one wants to say that nowadays. But all that to say, women are amazing. They are superheroes. Finding that balance is so hard, of being both like soft and maybe like want to be like a homemaker, or you're just more nurturing towards your friends, family, but also you can show up and be really strong and really badass, to be honest. So I just think women are amazing, and I really want to talk more about that in coming episodes. But I think what I'm really trying to say is that my podcast is a safe space in such a liberal world nowadays, a very crazy world, that I want like us women to really like come together as a community and shout each other out like, yes, you are balanced. Yes, you are so strong. Yes, you are so capable. Yes, you are so soft and nurturing. Like you can be all those things. And it's also okay to speak your opinion. I don't think that us women who believe like I do should be silenced. Because there's a lot of us out there, and we have so much to share with the world. I think we do things with beauty and grace, but also with strength and dignity. And not me trying to like quote a Bible verse, but we are clothed with strength and dignity, and we laugh without fear of the future. And I think that we'll get into Proverbs 31 more, but that is such a synopsis of what a true woman of God is being strong and having dignity, no fear of the future. We are so bold in our beliefs. We do not fear what anyone thinks of us. And I think we're just living in a time in American society where I think we're finding out like a lot more people think like us, and it's liberating, and we're starting to be more bold in how we speak. And I don't want us to feel silenced. And even if like you're listening and you're not from America, I have followers from Canada, the UK, South Africa, everywhere, Australia. Just because you're not American, like, doesn't mean like you can't listen to this podcast. Like, I don't want it to seem like this is just for American women, but I hope that like anyone listening, no matter where you're from, you can take these principles of what the Bible says, and also like what makes an American woman and the traditional values that we hold, and apply that to your life. And I just hope that we can grow together. And I think what we're doing is really cool. And eventually, like, I'd love to get sponsors on board. Again, this is just a passion project of mine. I have a microphone, I have a way to edit and publish, and that's all I need. And quite frankly, if I never get a sponsor, that is totally okay. I'm doing this because I love speaking about this stuff, and that there was a space that needed to be filled with this podcast in our world. And I really pray that this just impacts people and lets women have the freedom to do what they want with their life and not feel like there's only one way of doing things. Like, we all have to be feminists, or we all have to shave our heads if Trump wins, or like, you know, just crazy stuff like that. So I hope you just feel validated that there are other women out there that think like you, and that we would be bold in our beliefs together. And whether I get sponsors or not, I do not care at all. This is so fulfilling to me to talk about. And we actually have some really cool guests lined up. And next week's is Nick, but I count him as a guest, but he's like a built-in guest because he lives with me and I'm forced him to do it, which he was so excited to do it. But all that to say, we have amazing guests coming on that are going to give their input from a wise biblical perspective that I'm really, really pumped for. We just have so much that we're going to be talking about. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. It's going to be so fun, and stay tuned on Instagram for all the updates regarding the podcast. Please subscribe or follow the podcast if you can, or leave a review if you like this episode. And I will see you next week for a episode with my husband, Nick. Bye.